Hello and welcome to another Extra Flange from Intoxicus Gaming. Today's February the 25th, and I'm sure as many of you have heard and seen, Xbox has released a blog on their website from Phil Spencer that gives us a bunch of details and so on about the Xbox Series X. A lot's been confirmed, and there's some interesting, unexpected stuff. So while I fumble around with my new hotkeys that I'm still learning to flange up because it's a new thing, so I'm a little bit fumbly, and I'm like, what's going on here? That's me figuring out my new hotkeys. It's just a new thing, learning curve. Anyways, to the actual topic, the blog post is titled, What You Can Expect from the Next Generation of Gaming. It's written by Phil Spencer, and I think it's kind of cute that his title apparently is Head of Xbox. Anyways, before I click a wrong key that caused me troubles last time I tried to shoot this, the first section of this if you want to read it yourself. It's more just kind of marketing stuff, trying to fluff up Xbox Series X. I don't really need that. What we're here for is the actual technical details. Raw power is just part of the story. I couldn't help but notice that one line before it gets into the actual stats. It's like, it does have some nice power to it. So it's confirmed it's going to be on the latest Zen 2 and RDNA 2 architectures. If you're not familiar with it, Zen 2 is a Ryzen 3000 series with a chiplet architecture. And it's been kicking ass when it comes to multi-threaded performance, but not so good when it comes to single-threaded performance. But we're getting more and more so where games are getting better at taking advantage of multi-threaded performance. So yeah, it's good. It's definitely good. I think I don't recall seeing anything too specific on CPU clock speeds or anything like that, but the rumors are that it's going to be like something 3800 level when it comes to AMD processors, custom CPU. And before we get into the GPU teraflops, I looked at CPU teraflops because it's like, okay, how many teraflops do you get out of a CPU? Out of a high-end, not even a full teraflop. And also, before we get into the teraflop GPU spec of the Series X, if you don't know what a teraflop is, a flop is a floating point operation. I forget what the initialism acronym actually stands for, but it's basically how many floating point calculations can be done in a second. Floating point being the decimal, because there's different types of numbers you deal with in programming. So it's like decimal, where there's a set number where it's set how many numbers after the decimal they are. Floating point, the decimal can be anywhere, and it makes math a lot trickier because it has to figure out where to put the decimal point all the time. So that's why floating points become a significant measure of how many calculations per second, because it's kind of one of the most intensive, if not the most intensive, when it just comes to the raw math behind everything. And it's been confirmed 12 teraflops is the number for the Xbox Series X. And just for some comparison and some context, an RTX 2080 Ti from NVIDIA is 13.45 teraflops. They're actually really good. Like, that's a lot of power. So yeah, they do got it going when it comes to power, but the lack of exclusives might mean they need the power to try and convince people it's worth buying, especially when they got the streaming service and Xbox Game Pass on PC. So, I mean, I'm only buying one really for the channel, to tear it down and all that good stuff and review it. But, I wouldn't buy one except for novelty otherwise. So, yeah, for me personally, the power's great, but it won't convince me to buy one outside of doing it for work as part of my job. And that it compares to the RTX 2080 Ti so closely is really impressive. I gotta give them credit there. I am a PC person when it comes down to it, so I'm always like, yeah, raw PC better. But I'm not against consoles. I just prefer PC strongly. Like, if I can play a game on PC, I will play it on PC, given the opportunity. Like Death Stranding, once it got announced on PC, I kind of lost interest playing on PlayStation. So I was like, I'll just wait for PC. But that's just me. That's not anything against consoles. And consoles are totally great. Just I don't want my PC preference to be taken as anything against consoles. I have a PS4 Pro. I have a Nintendo Switch. I just don't own Xbox because there's no exclusives to give me a reason to. And just while I'm on that, the only reason I have a PS4 Pro is because of exclusives. But that doesn't mean, like, nothing against consoles. They're totally great. I just don't want people to be like, oh, you're one of those PC only people. No, 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 no. I prefer PC strongly, but consoles are great. And we did get off on a bit of a tangent there, so back to the topic. With the teraflops, it's super powerful, super great, especially for a console. PS5's rumored to be more like 9, which is still pretty good, but not necessarily that great. But also with the PS5, I wouldn't be surprised if there's more of a mid-generation refresh than we might see with the Xbox Series X. Anyway, a big point I wanted to touch on, and also it comes to the ray tracing, touches on that too, so kind of jumping ahead a little bit. This kind of confirms some speculation and rumors about AMD's GPU releases. There's been rumors of this big NVIDIA killer Navi 2 release, and I'd say if AMD can put a 12 teraflop RDNA 2 architecture GPU in an Xbox Series X, that's probably going to be roughly what their NVIDIA killer Navi 2 looks like. I would speculate, and I wouldn't be surprised if it also, the Navi 2 that's rumored does have hardware ray tracing, because obviously AMD's flanged it up, but they've not announced it as part of their next GPU releases. They tend to sit on these details to try to make big announcements and hype it up and all that. But it's just, I want to touch on it because I've not really seen too many people talk about, oh, they kind of leaked what they're doing with their GPUs by accident here. They probably didn't intend, like, they might not have just thought about this, or maybe they did and were like, whatever. Or maybe they thought it'd help, if they did realize what they're doing, they might have thought it might help hype up the coming AMD GPU release of the Navi 2 big thing that's been hyping up and getting rumors. So basically these stats tell us that, we've got something very interesting coming from AMD GPU hardware wise when it comes to PC hardware. And it's kind of interesting how this works, because what they're doing is customized PC hardware customized for a console type flange and context and scenario. And that's the thing, people have been commenting about the Xbox Series X, is it looks like a Corsair One. No consoles looked more like a PC ever. Except for the original ones way back in the day when consoles were brand new, that were literally keyboards with the screen all together. So it's kind of coming full circle in a sense, because the original consoles were just limited PCs. Like, you could program your own games on the very first consoles, or at least one of them. I'm a bit fuzzy on which ones were which. Anyways, just the more commentary, it's coming full circle, and like, this hardware is just custom flanged PC hardware for console context. So if this is what's going to be in the Xbox Series X, there's no equivalent from AMD out there when it comes to PC hardware. This tells me that that's going to be roughly what their next PC hardware probably looks like, with probably the same features. So just wanted to throw that out there, something to think about, something not a lot of people have been talking about, and somewhat tangential. We'll get back to the actual Xbox Series X stuff now, although we will be referring to PC stuff constantly because of the comparisons are just unavoidable. Anyways, the variable rate shading, I guess it's their own special patented form of it, whatever that's good for. I've seen it really put out there more for VR, but it's definitely something that can be used for anything. But the focus has been on VR because of some of the issues VR has with performance and motion sickness, so it's been more VR focused, what I've seen about variable rate shading. But it can it can be used for anything, and it's good. It's would be a good comparison would be variable bit rates for encoding. Same kind of idea, like the actual specific execution will probably be very different, but the same idea where, if there's a scene where there's a lot of black or a darkness or not a lot of detail, they turn some things down if you don't need that detail. So definitely help with performance in a lot of games, even with the 12 teraflops. And where I think it'll be most important is, of course, VR, like I mentioned, but also whenever 8K TVs actually become a practically ownable thing, because right now, 8K TVs, you're not going to have one unless you're rich, and there's only, 3 of them out there? I'm not sure how many, I'm just talking shit, but, there's, not a lot of 8K TVs. They're very expensive, and there's not even 8K content. Like, some of the Linus Tech Tips videos on 8K are interesting because it's like, oh, we're barely even there. So we'll touch on that more when they bring up 8K. It's just the reason I'm bringing it up, because I think when they actually do have 8K games and content that's actually playable, with people actually having 8K TVs to play it on, variable rate shading will be huge there because of just the intense amount of data 8K is needed to process. Like 4K is intense enough, and 8K it's literally double 4K. So it's double the data, and 12 teraflops is okay enough for 4K now. That's the thing. On a 2080 Ti, on a PC doing 4K with maxed out settings, that 60 FPS, you're not always going to get it. We're still not even really that good at 4K yet. Your 4K on a console is all about the variable resolution. And oftentimes your 4K on a console isn't even really 4K because they've downsampled the resolution so far, so you actually get 30 or 60 FPS. And that's where variable rate shading comes in. It'll help mitigate a lot of that. Even for 4K, it'll help out. But I think it'll really have the most impact when they try and do 8K content. And it'll be like, I think you might need variable rate shading to do 8K content unless they do a mid-gen refresh. Because 12 teraflops for 8K content, 13.45 has trouble with 8K content. Or, sorry, 4K content. I meant to say 4K. Like, 13.45 teraflops on the NVIDIA 2080 Ti is not really properly enough for 4K yet. So I think variable rate shading will actually be important if it's what they say it is. There's a thing with this stuff. Sometimes it can look great when they advertise it on paper, then the execution doesn't live up to their advertising. So hopefully variable rate shading is what they say it is. Now we're on to hardware accelerated DirectX ray tracing. Well, of course it'd be DirectX. I had a brain fart there. Never mind what I just... Yeah. Anyway, so it is interesting that they mentioned specifically DirectX ray tracing. Because I just imagined they would have flanged up their own ray tracing implementation, but I guess I just wasn't thinking that through because Microsoft makes DirectX. Like, of course they'd be using DirectX. But it's interesting. It makes me wonder how much DirectX they use on the consoles. Anyways, that's not too important. That's not really what we're here to talk about. Just noticing the DirectX specificity is interesting because they don't really need to put it there. Like, that's the only place you can find ray tracing right now. There's no ray tracing on Vulkan. There's no ray tracing on OpenGL. None that I'm aware of. So as far as I'm aware, there is only DirectX ray tracing for games, period. So it's just why the specificity there? Maybe they just want to hype up DirectX, or I don't know. It's just like, why even mention DirectX? Because there ain't no other ray tracing. Anyways, it sounds great, and like I was saying, kind of leaks that they're going to AMD is going to have it on their future GPUs, which, I mean, of course they're going to. They got to keep up with NVIDIA, but you know, how will it compare to NVIDIA's ray tracing performance and just visually? We'll have to wait and see, of course. The whole accurate reflections, the acoustics. I guess the acoustic, they can use it to do acoustics too. That's not really been mentioned. That's interesting. Because so far, ray tracing's just been talking about like light and reflections and light pathing and that kind of stuff. I've not heard anyone mention acoustics when it comes to ray tracing. Interesting. We're going to have to wait and see more, but my big takeaway from the hardware ray tracing is like, that doesn't surprise me at all that it's being included, because NVIDIA started that. It makes sense, makes everything look better. It's just the performance issue that holds it back, and that'll come with time, with optimizations, better hardware. But yeah, what really gets me more is that with AMD not having any current GPUs announced with hardware ray tracing support, they kind of leaked that they're going to be doing that, which, like I said, of course they're going to be doing that. So to move on to other parts where they get some more actually really interesting things, both Sony and Xbox seem to be hyping up their SSD stuff. So with that, you're going to get faster with an SSD because it's an SSD and doesn't have a spinning disk with a little arm that takes all this physical time to physically find things. So you're going to be faster with an SSD, even if it's a mediocre SSD, with a little caveat. Apparently, if your SSD doesn't have a controller and the machine has to do all the controller chip work, it just screws it over, so which is kind of rare and only happens with super cheap SSDs apparently, so not really much of a concern. But worth noting that if the SSD doesn't have a controller chip on board, it's not that good anymore. But that's not really a realistic scenario, but just interesting to note. So they're really hyping this up, though. It's reminiscent to me of Anthem's claims of no load times, more so with the PlayStation trying to hype up their SSD implementation like it's something special and no load times. And like, I mean, I've got a WD Black NVMe for my PC for games. It's damn fast. I got great load times. It's really good. But I feel like they are overhyping this and overplaying it. And they're like, oh, fast travel is just that, fast. You're still going to have load screens. That's a necessity. They might be better. They might be shorter than console users are used to. But us PC people are used to like very short boot times and very short load screens for the most part. So from my perspective, it's like took you guys long enough. But I mean, it's great. I don't mean to be too negative, but I can't help but be like, took you guys long enough. Could have flanged that up a bit sooner, maybe. But I do get there is a cost thing, and it's only somewhat recently the costs have come down. But even in the mid-gen refresh, I thought they would have at least thrown a cheapish SSD. That's the thing, even a cheap SSD, as long as it has an actual controller chip in it, is better than a hard drive. So I'm sure they could have if they really wanted to. But yeah, so it's the whole SSD hype just kind of falls flat on me because I'm like, no, it took you guys long enough to catch up there. Yeah, I don't got too much more to say other than I think they're overplaying and overhyping how much SSDs do. And people are going to be like, well, we still have load screens. What the hell, guys? And it's going to be like, well, they oversold it. You should have thought for yourselves. I hope that didn't come off as too negative there, but... Anyway, so to the next one, quick resume. This I find very interesting. The new quick resume feature lets you continue multiple games from a suspended state almost instantly, returning you to where you were and what you're doing without waiting through long loading screens. This sounds interesting, and I read this one as like, why aren't PCs doing this already? Because PCs could do this. It takes some work to get their shit together too, and you'd probably need Windows and Microsoft to work with all the game launchers and game companies to make it happen. But this is really cool. Excuse me. I think this is really cool and unique, and I really like this. It sounds like it's like with the Nintendo Switch, where here, I'll get my Switch out so we can have an example. Like, I got my Celeste game going, and, I take it out from sleep mode and it just goes right there. But it only does one game at a time. So this is like that, but with multiple games. And it doesn't seem like... I was just putting my Switch away. It doesn't seem like it'd be that hard to implement. You just have to think to do it. And it's obviously easier on a console, but with, PC games, it'd be harder to implement, but very possible. And basically you put the game software into sleep mode where it just doesn't do anything, remembers where it was at, and then you can just go back to it. And this is great. Like, we've got sleep modes built into PCs and all that, and like consoles. So it's just like the next evolution of the sleep mode. And this is really cool because now you can like have, like 5 games on the go and just switch between them. And it's so much easier to just be like, oh, I want to play this game. Oh, I want to play this game. I'm sure there'll be some limits on it and stuff, but like, I hope that lives up to what we can read here. Like that seems really cool and really interesting. That's actually one of the features I'm most interested in. And I really want to see that to come to PC. And maybe even like the Nintendo Switch and the PS5. I think that's something that may even become standard in the future. That's a really great feature. And just before we move on, like on PC, if you're trying to run through games, like the CPU still runs the game in the background to a certain extent, depending on the game. Some games, not so much. but they just haven't set it up to do that. It could be done. They just have to do it, which, is easier said than done, obviously. But yeah, it's just interesting because, yeah, it's just like, why haven't we done this before? Why did no one think of this? It's really interesting to me, but we should move on. So the DLI, dynamic latency input, this seems interesting, but this one I'm a little more skeptical about. This seems like one of those ones that sounds great on paper, but then winds up not working as well as it's supposed to. So I hope it lives up to what it says here, but I can't help but be skeptical. Like, Linus Tech Tips did a great video on this recently. MIMO, MU-MIMO, is this like thing with your wireless router to help it connect different things better, but the way they implemented it just isn't that good, so it just doesn't work. Like, if your router has MIMO, go turn it off now if it's on. It's just holding your router back. Literally, it doesn't work. Like, yeah, so anyways, quick little story. I was having trouble with my router getting full speeds on TELUS fiber, 750 up and down. I got a really good deal on it, like crazy good deal on it. Anyways, wasn't getting full speeds. It was MIMO. Yep. So yeah, MIMO will screw your router up and make it not work well, and it seems similar to that, and it's wireless. There's a lot of complexity to wireless signals and protocols and all that, so there's a lot of room for stuff to go wrong. I don't know much about the technical details of wireless networking, but I know enough to just be skeptical about this one. Like I said, I hope it works like they're advertising it. I really do, but I can't help but be skeptical. That one's going to be one of those ones that looks great on paper, but then the actual execution falls a bit short. But it sounds great. So moving on, HDMI 2.1 innovation, no DisplayPort. Like, I mean, there's issues with the different DisplayPort versus HDMI standards and different versions. Like, we need to make some progress on that, so we go back to having one connector for everything and not having like, oh, I got HDMI 2.0 instead of 2.1, now I can't do a high frame rate, or stuff like that. So with this, I just can't help but be like, no DisplayPort option. But whatever, HDMI is kind of more common, but DisplayPort would be kind of nice too. Like, I don't see why not do both. Why not both? I mean, that why not both meme with that little girl is just one of my favorite memes ever. That little girl who's like, why not both? One of the wisest kids ever in memes. Anyways, jokes aside, apparently they partnered with the HDMI forum and TV manufacturers to enable the best gaming experience through features such as auto low latency mode and variable refresh rate. So, I mean, like, NVIDIA on their GPUs, they've got a low latency mode that seems to work pretty well. Since they added it and I realized it was worth turning on, and yeah, I've been liking it. So I hope it's comparable to what NVIDIA is doing. This is all by AMD though. And unfortunately, it does bear mentioning, AMD's been having a lot of trouble with their drivers. So when it comes to some of these things that are more driver related at a driver level, I mean, there's hardware level to it too, but it's I hope it works better on the Xbox than it's been working for PC drivers, but that's an AMD specific thing, and I do hope they get that figured out. Anyways, it's great though that we're going to have low latency modes and variable refresh rate in the Xbox Series X. So I hope I'm not coming across as negative or anything. I'm trying to have healthy skepticism and just question the surface value of things, kind of flange. Anyways, like VRR, variable refresh rate, also known as FreeSync, or NVIDIA's version is G-Sync. They're great. I love my FreeSync G-Sync compatible monitor. I just wish it were full G-Sync because it goes all the way to 1 FPS instead of cutting off at 45. So if you don't know much about VRR, FreeSync, G-Sync, FreeSync and G-Sync are each company's specific implementation of VRR. VRRs actually existed for a while. Like you could turn it on in the NVIDIA control panel before we had all these monitors, if I'm remembering correctly. I'm pretty sure. Anyways, variable refresh rate as a driver level option has been available for quite some time. I don't think a lot of people found too much value in it until we had these monitors with FreeSync and G-Sync, which are specific implementations of VRR that brought it to a higher level where the monitor actually syncs up with the GPU's output of frames. There's more complexity to it than that. I'm being very surface level because we're not here to talk about the technical details of VRR. But just that it has it is great. But to take advantage of it, there's not exactly a lot of TVs that have any sort of VRR implementation. Some of them do exist. Some of the videos, Linus Tech Tips, great channel. I love his content so much. He's done some videos where there's been like gaming TVs that have VRR, so it is coming and it is becoming a thing. But generally, to take advantage of VRR, you're going to need a computer monitor, which is better for gaming anyways, for a whole bunch of reasons. So I wouldn't be surprised if as a result of this, we wind up seeing more people console gaming on computer monitors instead of TVs, which, to segue into the next one, they now have up to 120 Hz/FPS support instead of just 60 FPS, which is a huge step forward for consoles to start supporting high refresh rates and variable refresh rate. But out of this, I see that we're going to wind up having more console players buy computer monitors, because that's the only way they're going to be that's the only way they're going to affordably be able to take advantage of VRR and high refresh rates. But when it comes to the 120 FPS support, at what resolution? I wouldn't be surprised if there's some restrictions, like you don't only get 60 FPS at 4K, you only get 30 FPS at 8K, and that 120 FPS is only at 1080p or maybe 1440. I wouldn't be surprised. They weren't specific. I wouldn't be surprised if they do allow a 120 refresh rate, but I think it'll be more performance bottleneck kind of thing where, like I was saying, on a 2080 Ti, you have a hard time getting 60 FPS with max settings. You got to turn some settings down to get a nice consistent 60 FPS. And I know if I got a 2080 Ti, I want everything maxed. So it's interesting. We'll have to see how exactly the whole high frame rate, high refresh rate thing plays out and what the specifics are. So my guess would be any game can go up to 120 FPS, but because of performance bottlenecks, we'll wind up seeing a pattern where 8K gets limited to 30 generally, 4K will generally be limited to 60, and anything under 4K will get the 120, just because of performance bottlenecks, not for any other reason. So it's correct. It's technically correct for them to say so, but I think they need to give us some more details so people know what to actually expect, because it's kind of like, oh, we've got 4K on the current generation, but 4K is not even really 4K, and most of the time you only get 30 FPS. Like now, they've advertised 8K. They even put 8K on the chip that got leaked. Like it looked like it was hand scratched in two. Maybe it was just not the best laser engraving or something, but it literally looked like someone who was really good at it scratched it in by hand. There's some very interesting inconsistencies on the engraving on that, just in like how it was engraved in. Like it looked hand done. Anyways, that's not the point. Like, they're advertising 8K, but how well will they be able to do 8K? Will it be a true 8K, or will it be the variable resolution kind of stuff where the resolution scales depending on your frame rate? So, it's one of these things where it's like, oh yay, 120 FPS, but it's like, what does that really look like? Same thing with the 8K for both next generation consoles and 4K for this generation. Yeah, you can say it, but what is it really? Because what it is really isn't exactly what the general impression people get when they say this thing. Because you say 120 FPS support, the general impression that is given is you'll get 120 FPS all the way to 8K, which just isn't practical with 12 teraflops. Like, that's just not practical with 12 teraflops. So it's interesting. In Canada, this might count as false advertising. I ran into some legit false advertising issues. That story is for another time. and actually made some complaints to the Competition Bureau Canada. Bethesda was actually one of the companies I ran into with some wacky false advertising stuff, and got a complaint based on it. Anyway, so in Canada, the legal standard for false advertising is called the General Impressions Test, and it's pretty much literally what it sounds like. It's what's the general impression most people will get when they read that content. When people read this 120 FPS support, and also the same with the 8K, they're not being told important details that matter. They're getting a general impression that I think is a bit misleading. And, you know, I imagine a lot of people watching this channel are going to be more educated and understand these things I'm talking about. But there's a lot of people that don't watch this kind of content and don't understand these kind of things. They see 120 FPS support and their general impression is, oh shit, we got 120 FPS all the way to 8K. And, you know, it is a some but not all thing. And yeah, I'm concerned that when they make claims like 120 FPS support and 8K support without giving more details, that it's being a bit misleading, maybe or maybe not with intent. I can't really say to that, having no proof. And, you know, it's kind of a thing. Marketing does things like this until they get in trouble for it, to the point that they have to stop. So until they get in trouble, they'll keep doing stuff like this that is kind of misleading, depending on what your education is. Because I have a level of tech education where I look at this and I know you're not going to get 120 FPS at 8K with 12 teraflops plus maybe at best just under 1. So maybe 13 teraflops total, including the CPU. You're not even going to get 60 FPS at 8K with that. Like, you can barely get fucking 60 FPS at 4K with 13.45 teraflops. And a little bit of hyperbole on the barely, but I mean, I'm talking full max settings, and you can get 60 FPS, just not consistently. And like, we're not even there yet with 4K. So with the 8K, it's like, is the 8K claim really that legit? This is interesting. Really cool. The backwards compatibility being announced. Oh, that is great. That is awesome. That is so good. Because, like, for me personally, the middle Gears of War titles aren't on PC. Gears 1 and I think 2 also is, but 3 and 4 isn't, and 5 is. I could be misremembering about Gears 2. Definitely Gears 1 is. But anyways, so if I want to catch up on all Gears of War, that's one of the few exclusives that would pull me towards an Xbox. So it's like, oh, if I can get a Series X, I can just catch up on all of Gears of War just right there, which is great. Like, stuff like that's great. I think that needs to become standard, and I think any fear that having backwards compatibility will hurt game sales is completely unfounded. It will help console sales, and it will help game sales, because if you buy this console because you can do backwards compatible games and now you can play your old games, you're more likely to buy the console, of course. But now that you have the console, it's like, well, should I just buy this game on the Xbox Series X because I already got one for the backwards compatibility? So it's like one thing can lead to another, where they bought the console mostly because of backwards compatibility, perhaps, but then they wind up buying more Xbox games than they might have otherwise. Or, you know, I'm throwing out hypothetical scenarios. That might not be the best hypothetical out there, but you should be able to get what I'm getting at is, I truly believe backwards compatibility helps console sales, and it does not hurt console sales. And I think it actually will indirectly help software sales for that console generation, because now that they have the new generation of console, it's like, well, I guess why not buy this game for that console anyways? So it seems it's so many unfounded fears when it comes to emulation and backwards compatibility and used game sales that just don't hold up to actual facts and reality. So it's really good. It's really awesome to see backwards compatibility. I hope the PS5 also does that. They'd just be hurting themselves by not doing it. And yeah, also, note on the backwards compatibility. I wonder what kind of upscaling they might have for older games. Because if they have some sort of upscaling method that doesn't add like horrendous input latency, because that's the problem with upscaling, is the extra work can add to input latency sometimes. more so on a panel level than on a GPU level. But you know, that's the thing with TVs and input lags. Bit of another aside here. The reason TVs in large part have more issues with input lag is because of all the extra processing, which sometimes is upscaling too. And that's oftentimes what game mode does, is it turns all that off, so all that extra processing doesn't add input latency. But because the computer and CPU in the panel itself, it is a limited CPU, but there is one, has to do all that extra work. Because of the upscaling or extra whatever, that adds to input latency because it can only do so much work, and it's a quite limited CPU. Otherwise, TVs would be a lot more expensive. Anyways, that was a bit of an aside, but point is, as long as they do it in a way that doesn't add input latency, this could be really great for old games, because it's always awesome to have an old game that gets some extras added to it, looks better, as long as nothing's like screwed with too much. So if they didn't say it directly, but they kind of seem like they might be hinting at it with improved resolution and visual fidelity. They didn't outright say they're going to upscale or anything like that. So it'll be interesting. But I mean, a lot of these older games, they can just literally turn up the resolution and that'll add a lot, or start that sentence over, or add extra anti-aliasing, which basically anti-aliasing, or at least the original forms of it, where basically you render at a higher resolution, then downscale it to your actual intended resolution, and you actually wind up getting a lot of detail still, and it gets rid of a lot of jaggies because you rendered it at a high resolution. Then when you compress it, you actually can retain the kind of detail that helps eliminate jaggies and makes curves look better and that kind of thing. But anti-aliasing has evolved a lot since then. There's a lot more to it than just rendering at a higher resolution and scaling it down. So, but that's what I'm trying to get at, is just from basic, the most fundamental anti-aliasing for video games where you render at a high resolution and scale it down, they could do that. And that alone would do a lot to improve game fidelity, visual fidelity. I have to cough. Give me a second. Oh no, my cough button. What? Sorry. I got a cough. Now you can hear me. Anyways, I got a cough button set up for when I cough so I can mute it, but apparently because I was focused on the wrong screen, it wanted to jump to the end of the thing instead of actually doing the cough button. Oh god, where are we now? I'm too late in this. I'm not going to start over, so we're just going to roll with this. My apologies. So, smart delivery. This is interesting. So this seems like the kind of stuff we've been seeing some Sony patents about, where they try and suggest things to you, I think. No, I'm sorry. Please take that back. I got a bit mixed up. I had a brain fart there. No, I don't know what I was thinking there. I just totally had a brain fart there. Anyways, scratch what I was saying. I don't know. I derped hard there. Anyways, so what smart delivery is, you don't have to rebuy games you already own. And then you also make sure you get the right version for which Xbox you're playing on. So let's say you've got, as they use the example, Halo Infinite for the Xbox One X or whatever console it's on. I don't know. I'm not big into Xbox. Let's say it's on Xbox One X now. You've already got Halo Infinite. You get your Xbox Series X. You pop the disc in there. It's like, oh, this is the Xbox One X version, but we're going to download you the Xbox Series X version. So that's what that is. And I don't know what I was thinking before when I was talking about the PlayStation stuff. Totally got mixed up. This is really cool because this goes with the backwards compatibility kind of stuff. So like this basically means like you can pop an old game in. It'll be like, okay, I can't play this game as it is, but I'll download the Xbox Series X version. So your old game disc is still valid in the Xbox Series X. And I think cross-generation both ways too. So let's say you've got an Xbox One X now, you want to buy an Xbox Series X in the future, but now they're selling Xbox Series X games. You can buy that Xbox Series X game, throw it in your Xbox One X, but you get downloaded the Xbox One version or Xbox One X version. God, the Xbox Series X, Xbox One X, like, come on, Xbox. Other people have said this, but like, get your naming sorted out. I like you can make Xbox sex jokes about the Xbox Series X, which I've seen far too few of. Anyways, ties in with Xbox Game Pass because you can buy games there, all that good stuff. Xbox Game Pass to me has been more about playing Xbox games on PC, which is great. I love it. Xbox Game Pass is great, but the idea that I'll be able to use Xbox Game Pass to, I got my account and it can jump between PC and the actual Xbox Series X, that's really cool. Even if I might personally not play my Xbox Series X much or use it more of a media machine, just that they're doing this is cool. And this whole PC interoperability where you can play Xbox games on PC and they kind of, you can just jump between the two. I hope save games also come along with that. But yeah, this kind of stuff is great. This is great. It's just, if only they had more exclusives. But they somehow think they're not competing with Nintendo and Sony anymore. Yeah, that's pretty much the most of it. They mentioned xCloud, which is going to be interesting. They mentioned their 15 different Xbox game studios and kind of hyping themselves up. Yeah, that's just older Xbox related things. So yeah, that's pretty much the last of it there. Looks really good, except for the lack of exclusives. Like, hardware wise, looking great. I gotta say, it's making AMD's Navi 2 release look like it's going to be a pretty heavy hitter. I hope the AMD Navi 2 release does more than 12 teraflops though. So I wouldn't be surprised if it does, and it's more closer to the 2080 Ti because, financial reasons. And speaking of financial reasons, something I want to end on is, with all these awesome specs, what the hell is this thing going to cost? Because there's been talks, what are they going to cost? There's, generally the consensus is too much more than $500 is going to turn consumers away, and they need to aim more closer to $450. And with that kind of hardware, that ain't going to be cheap. How much of a loss leader is this going to be? Like, how much are they going to be taking $300 hits again on hardware sales? I wouldn't be surprised. Like, if you look at the cost of a 2080 Ti, it ain't cheap. Although, you do have to factor in the NVIDIA tax. They have higher prices than they could because they can get away with it. But they also do research and stuff that kind of justifies it. Like, they innovated CUDA and the multi-threaded thing with GPUs. If it weren't for NVIDIA, I don't know where we'd be with that. So they've innovated a lot. Like, ray tracing alone is a big innovation for gaming, even though it's got a little ways to go. They innovated physics, and just physics in general has been standard, but their specific PhysX implementation is, actually, I didn't realize, still far superior to any other. And like, if you play, games that are optimized for NVIDIA's PhysX on AMD, you actually get less physics things going on. So anyways, the point is, NVIDIA innovates a lot, so they do somewhat justify the quote-unquote NVIDIA tax, which AMD doesn't have. So if we factor that out, it's still going to be an expensive GPU. It's like, yeah, well over $1,000 Canadian, more closer to 1,000 American, but for a 2080 Ti. So I imagine the AMD Navi 2 would probably be under 1,000 US, or maybe close to 1,000 US. But that's the thing. If AMD's GPU, that's probably what they based the Series X GPU on, is probably going to be close to $1,000. I'm just totally guessing, but it's definitely going to be over 500. Ain't no way that Navi 2 is going to be under 500. Maybe 850 if we're being more generous, I guess, but you get the idea. The GPU that this is probably based on is more expensive than the price point we're willing to pay for the whole system. The CPU it's based on ain't that cheap either. Yeah. So, if it's a consideration I had with the PS5 coming out, where if you total up the equivalent parts available or projected prices for parts to build a PC equivalent of this, it'd be like $1,000 or more. So yeah, I mean, of course I'm talking retail prices, so if we get to wholesale prices, they're paying a lot less, and also manufacturing costs. Like, if we think about in terms of manufacturing costs, the numbers go down, but then we could be at a scenario where the cost is close to or beyond the price point they intend to sell it at, which is going to be interesting to see what they finally price these at, when they announce pricing. And yeah, there's also talk about the kind of Xbox and PlayStation might be in a bit of a game of chicken in a sense when it comes to announcing pricing, because, and they've kind of done it before, where they don't want to announce their pricing until the other person does so they can undercut them. So I wouldn't be surprised if both of them are waiting for the other one to announce price so they can just announce it like even $10-$20 less than the other person, just to be like, oh, we're less than you, just because that's the games they play when it comes to these kind of things. So yeah, it'll be interesting. I wouldn't be surprised if we do get a $550 or $600 kind of price tag on this, just because they do have a lower tier option for people. So I wouldn't be surprised if they're less afraid to go high price tag because they've got a low price tag option to parallel the Series X. Codename Lockhart, which might be a streaming only kind of deal again. They've been focusing more on the high end Series X, but yeah. So pricing wise, we're going to have to wait and see, as I'm so fond of saying, and it'll be interesting not only to see the pricing, but how much of a loss they're going to be taking. And I'll go as far to predict both companies will be taking a loss on these console sales. I can't see them selling them at even breaking even with the kind of hardware they're putting in there. I just don't. Yeah, I think that about wraps it up. I can't think of anything else to cover and touch on. The pricing was the last point I wanted to flange up before ending this. Yeah, as you can tell, the extra flanges do tend to be a bit longer, but that's because it goes into so much more depth than other content. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed this. I know I enjoyed flanging it up. I have fun with this stuff. Anyways, so the regular housekeeping stuff, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring that little notifications bell. Give me a thumbs up if you like this content, thumbs down if you don't. But if you give me a thumbs down, let me know in the comments what I can do to turn that thumbs down around. So, because I am new at this, I'm always trying to do better and improve, and your feedback and input, as long as it's respectful, is much appreciated. Just, don't hop in the comments and poop on me, because that's not cool. Just there's please stick to critical, respectful criticism, but I am very much looking for it. Anyway, so yes, the Patreon and GoFundMe, those are finally flanged up. If you want to support Intoxicus Gaming, that's the place to do so. Links are in the description. I even threw in a PayPal link. If you don't like GoFundMe or Patreon for whatever reason, you can just donate directly. And the GoFundMe is specifically for equipment and other costs directly for Intoxicus Gaming. The Patreon's more just a general support me, Shy Guy, and Midna kind of deal. Same with the PayPal, it's more general just support me, Shy Guy, and Midna kind of deal, unless you PayPal me and say specifically you want your donation to only go to Intoxicus Gaming. In that case, it'll only do equipment and needs for that help improve the channel or keep it running. Let me see, is there anything else? Yeah, I think that's it. I think I'm forgetting something, but yeah, I hope you enjoyed the content. Will be more of it flanging up. Oh, yes. What do you guys think? Jeez, yeah, it's been a long video. What do you guys think? Are you hyped for the Xbox Series X? Are you more hyped for PlayStation? What do you think of all the specs and stuff? Is there anything that stands out to you that I didn't notice? Flange that all up in the comments. Let's get some discussion going. And yeah, that's everything. Remember to bring a good one, or bring a remember to bring a good one. Oh my god, that was great. Remember to bring a towel and have a good one. Have a great day.